Hello friends, welcome back to the Photoshop Basics for Scrapbooking class. In today's lesson, we are going to go one step further on the topic of creating shapes. And today I want to show you how, after you have created your shapes or when you are creating your shapes, how you can add an outline around the outside of it. There are a number of reasons why this may be something you want to learn or something that you want to do while you are putting together your pages. And it's just a really good skill to know how to do inside of both Photoshop Creative Cloud and Photoshop Elements. So let's head over to the computer so I can show you how to put an outline around your shapes. All right, friends, welcome back over here to my desktop. Today we are starting inside of Photoshop Creative Cloud and we're going to be working with the shape tool yet again. However, this time I'm going to show you how to create an outline around the perimeter of your shape for those times when you don't necessarily want to have a colored shape on your layout, and instead you might want a white background with perhaps white text on top, or maybe just a placeholder where you've got the black outline around your shape itself. So let's start by opening up a new canvas. I'm going to size this one at 6x8 just because that's a pretty easy size to work with. Then we're going to go over to the left-hand side here to the shape tool. I am going to create a rectangle, and then we're also going to create a circle so you can see the differences between the two. There's really not much difference, but I suppose we can talk about the different reasons why you might want to use these two different tools. So for the rectangle tool, I'm going to click into the middle of my page here. And let's say I want to create some kind of element for my page that's going to be, let's size it at maybe 2 inches wide by 2 inches tall. So we'll make this a square. So I'm going to create this with my customized width and height measurements. We'll hit OK, and now my shape is going to show up on my screen. Now from here, you can do a couple of different things. First of all, we can change the fill up at the top in the shape menu and make the fill white instead. We'll hit enter, and then that will go ahead and make our square here white. Now for adding an outline, we can do so right here within the shape tool by clicking on the stroke field and selecting any color that you want for the outline of your shape. In this case, I'm going to make my outline black. Right now, I have my outline thickness set to 5 pixels. But if I was printing this so that I could at least just see the lines to cut out my element, I might change this from 5 down to only 1 pixel instead. When we hit enter, then our square becomes white, or it saves those settings and makes the square white. Now for adding the outline around the outside of our shape, we can do this in 2 different ways. One is by using the shape menu itself, and the outline will become part of the shape. The other way we can do this is add a stroke afterwards to our shape, and then if you undo the action, then you can take the stroke away, which I'll talk about here in just a minute why you might want to do that. So to add the stroke to our shape directly from the shape menu, we're going to click on the box next to the word stroke. Then we're going to select whatever color we want to use. I'm going to go ahead and use black. And this next field right over from the stroke box, or where we selected the color, has a pixel width. Right now, my pixel width is set to 5 pixels wide. I'm actually going to change this and reduce it down to just 1 pixel so that my line can become super thin, making it easy to use for cutting the element out, but not necessarily having the black stroke as part of the shape once it is cut out of the paper. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to save all of those settings, and then when I hit enter one more time, it's going to clear out, and you can see my shape right here. So we've got the white square with this very thin black outline. I'm going to use my move tool and just push this to somewhere else on my page. And then we're going to do this again. So using the rectangle tool, I am going to go ahead and keep my fill as white, but I'm going to remove the stroke by clicking on this little color picker and using the box that's got a red line diagonally through the middle of the box. That means no stroke. So we're going to remove it. So with those settings entered into the bar up here, next I'm going to go ahead and click onto my background here. And I do also want to point out that I had my background layer selected as I was changing those settings. If I had the original rectangle, this little square that we made selected, any of the changes I would do up in the menu would affect the shape that I was currently selected on. So I just made sure to select my background and then change the settings and then click into the middle, and we can go ahead and do the same thing again here. So 2 inches in width by 2 inches in height, and let's hit OK. And then this time we're just going to hit enter, and the box will essentially disappear because it has no stroke around it. So you can't see it in amongst the rest of the page, right? So here is a second way of adding a stroke around the outside of your shape. First, what we need to do is come down to the rectangle or the shape we want to add our outline to, and we're going to select it in our layers panel, but also right click on the layer. In the menu that pops up, we need to go to rasterize the layer, which is essentially going to take away any of those editable functions. So now when I click on this layer with the rectangle that has been rasterized, you can see in the properties menu up here that there are no longer any fields that I can click to or select in order to alter what the rectangle looks like. Versus if I click on the rectangle that is still not rasterized, we can come into the properties and change the appearance here in the menu. So our shape menu preferences is still showing up. So once we have the shape rasterized, meaning we can't alter the properties of this rectangle via the rectangle or the shape tool, what we can do to add our outline to this shape is actually go up to the edit menu and we can click on stroke. Once the stroke pop-up menu comes up here, it's going to allow you to select that width again, which for me I'm going to keep at 1 pixel, but if you wanted a thicker outline, you could increase the width of your pixels here as well. We can select the color that we want to use, and then I always have my settings set to the center location. When we hit OK, it's then going to create the outline around our shape. So now you can see it, I can move it around, we can do whatever we want to do. Now, one of the reasons I might use a stroke tool instead of automatically putting those settings in there with the rectangle tool is if I am printing on a physical product. So a lot of times what I like to do is create a template. Let's just remove, well, I guess we'll keep this on there. So I like to create templates where I might add the shape onto a piece of paper. I could potentially put my text in the box and then print this out on regular copy paper. Then I can take my physical 2x2 square, tape it into this exact same spot, and in using my edit and undo move, we can undo the stroke. So my rectangle is still there, right? But my stroke is now gone. Let's do that one more time just so you can see how that is. So we'll add the stroke on here, right? We could print it out on my computer, and then we would remove the stroke, tape my physical product down onto the page I just printed, run it back through, and the outline would not print out on my physical card. That's generally when I'm using the edit and stroke option here. If I am going to be printing the outline around my shape, then I will do so. I will add the outline through the shape tool itself. Let's switch gears and do a circle this time, so an ellipse tool. This time we're going to keep our fill white, and we're going to take our stroke back to black, and then let's also bring this back down to 1 pixel. From here, we can click onto the background. Let's go to the background here. So we'll click onto the background, and let's make this a 2x2 inch circle. If I hit the enter button, then you're going to see the circle that is being covered up by this rectangle. So let's get rid of that. There we go. So there is our circle with the outline shape around the outside. I love printing my shapes with the outline around it if I am printing journaling inside of a shape. So for instance, maybe what I want to do is print out some circles of journaling where the journaling only goes on the bottom half of the circle, and I have a plan to add pattern paper to the top half of the circle. By having this outline around the outside, it gives me a very clearly defined cut mark for myself. I can use that inside of a die cut or a circle punch, or I can cut it by hand and know that I am going to be cutting out a perfect circle or as close to perfect as I can possibly get. For the outlines, you're mostly going to be using them when your colored background is white. If I were printing out a circle with journaling inside of it and I made my circles a color, so maybe I wanted them to be yellow and no stroke, right? I can still see the outline of my circle, so I don't need the black outline to be able to see it. It's mostly going to be when you have a white background that blends into the paper that you're printing on. Another reason you might use this, aside from being able to print it and cut it out easily, is to be able to see it on your layout, to know where the things are going to go. So maybe I was working on a 2x2 page and I'm just going to use this rectangle tool over and over again to show me where those 2x2 squares might go, right? So I can just copy and paste this and add it onto my canvas here until we have it filled in. One of the nice things about using shapes, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in a different lesson, is you can use them to add your photos or your journaling or your embellishments into via a clipping mask or a layer template. These become a layer template by having all of these different shapes. So it can also be an easy way to just go ahead and add your elements into your page. But primarily the outline for me is something I use when I know I want to cut something out, where I have journaling on top of a white background. So let's go to Photoshop Elements and do the same thing here. So let's begin by creating a new blank file. I've got a 12x8, sure, let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to come over to our shape tool on the left-hand menu underneath the draw section. And this time we're going to change our settings down here in the bottom before we click and add our shape to the page. So first let's go ahead and make our background white. Next, what we're going to do is create a fixed size. For this one, we're doing a rectangle, so let's do that 2" by 2" square. And then, once we have those settings all entered, we're going to go ahead and click onto the page here. Now, when I place it onto the canvas, you can see that there is a black outline that shows us where that shape is located. However, if I deselect the shape, so if I maybe use the move tool and I click off of it, the outline goes away. That outline is just there for you to be able to see. It's not something that's actually there physically on the page. To add the outline around this shape, the settings are not necessarily found inside of the rectangle or the shape settings itself. Instead, what you're going to do is with the shape, the layer of the shape you're working with selected, we're going to first come over to the layer and we need to simplify the layer, which is the same thing as rasterizing that we did in Photoshop Creative Cloud. So we're going to simplify it. And once it is simplified, we can come up to the edit menu and add a stroke or outline around the selection. I want my stroke to be 1 pixel in width. We're going to make it black so we can see it, keeping everything else the same, hitting OK. And now when I deselect, the shape outline is there. So we can see the outline and we can move it around to do whatever we want to do with it. We can do the same thing with our circle shape. So once we have selected our shape tool, I'm then going to go to the ellipse tool. Let's have this again be a white background, a fixed size, and we're going to make this 2 inches by 2 inches for a circle, a perfect circle. We'll click onto the screen, and again, we can see the outline of the shape temporarily here until I deselect and move on to a different layer. Let's go back to that circle with the shape selected, and in our layers panel you can see it's selected here. We're going to right click, simplify the layer, then we can go to edit and add our stroke outline. Again, I want this to be black, not white, and we're going to hit OK. And that gives us our 2 by 2 circle with the outline around it. One thing you can do with this too, and you can also do this with a filled in shape that's a different color where you don't need the outline. Once you have these shapes, you can use them to help you begin designing layouts, which we talked about a little bit last time. So let's say, for example, you have a set of chipboard circles, and those circles are sized at 1 inch each. You can start to use these shapes to design the pages that you're going to create. So in this case, I might create an ellipse. I want the ellipse to be white, a fixed size. We're going to make it 1 inch by 1 inch. Sounds good. And then we're going to click on the inside here. You know what, just for kicks, let's change this to maybe a really light gray. We'll do that instead because it's a little easier to see it this way. So maybe you have a total of 6 of these 1 inch circle chipboard pieces. You can use these placeholders, which we talked about a bit last time, to create, and let's just, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there we go. Just throw them all on there. You can use these to design your layout. So maybe you want to create a bulleted list with the 6 different chipboard pieces. If you want them to have an even spacing, you can bring the bottom one the furthest down you want it to go, the top one the furthest you want it to go up, then select all of them all at once, and there's a couple of menu items down here where you can have them all of the currently selected shapes have the same measurement where they're hitting at the top or the center or the bottom, the left, the middle, the right. So we could select the middle here to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly in the vertical column. And then there are these spacings that also allow you to make sure that everything is distributed evenly. So we can come over here to the center button, click on that one, and it's going to make sure that there is an even spacing between this top one and the bottom one. From here, you could then add some text boxes if you wanted to start to create some journaling pages. So let's just add in some words so you can see what that would look like. And we're starting to see how these different shapes and using them in different ways can help us to build and create our own layouts, which we'll get into that even more as we progress through these lessons. For this week, I would like for you to create both a rectangle/square shape and a circle shape inside of the program that you prefer to use. I would like for you to work with those settings. I would like for you to adjust the settings for the colors and the fill so you can get a feel for how that works. And then I would also like for you to add a stroke around the outside of your shapes. For those of you using Photoshop Creative Cloud, you can try it both ways. You can do it in those shape settings from the very start, or you can create your shape, rasterize the layer, and then add it through the edit and stroke options. For those of you using Photoshop Elements, you will have to use the simplifying layer and then the edit and stroke options to add the stroke around the outside of your shape. So I'd like for you to play around with those tools to get a feel for what that's like. And then when we meet back here next week, we're going to be talking about one more thing to do with these shapes, and that is how to add text inside of a shape, specifically how to add text inside of a circle or a shape that is not quite square. So next week, we're going to come back for that. Until then, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next lesson.